Testing, testing. Got another Bubooverse stream coming out. Why do I always sound so distant with this microphone? Testing on mode 1. Testing on mode 1. Testing on mode 2. Testing on mode 2. Testing on mode 3. I think mode 3 is the best, even if it's not very loud. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Today we're going to be looking at a paper called Imagic, text-based real image editing with diffusion models. This is a paper that comes out of Google Research. Right, you have here 1, 2, 3. This is the different affiliations of the authors. First author is going to be, or in this case, the first two authors are going to be the kind of more junior people that actually did the work. And then the last author is going to be the senior, kind of more manager, professor kind of person. So this is Irani out of Google Research and Weizmann Institute of Science. And then a bunch of people who are also part of Google Research. And one of these first authors is Technion, which is the Israeli university. This is a recent paper coming out just a couple days ago. Might even be yesterday. All right, so we have here the kind of attention-grabbing image and figure where you can basically do text-based semantic edits on a single real input image. You start here. This is the starting image, input image. For example, a dog standing up, and then you give it a text edit, such as a sitting dog, and then the this diffusion model will edit the original image such that the text more closely matches the image. Pairs of 1024 by 1024 images, so actually that's pretty high resolution, and it just goes to show kind of the progress in the image generation field. Text conditioned image editing. Most methods are currently limited to specific edit types or apply to synthetically generated images. The ability to apply complex text-guided semantic editing to a real image. Okay. I think it depends on your definition of that, because I've seen variations of this before. Blah, blah, blah. Contrary to previous work, our proposed method requires only a single image and a target text. Does not require any inputs such as an image mask or additional views of the object. Okay, our method leverages a pre-trained text-to-image diffusion model. Okay. Produces a text embedding that aligns with both the input image and the target text while fine-tuning the diffusion model to capture the image-specific appearance. Okay, so that's interesting. The embedding that they're producing is taking both the input image and the text, producing an embedding which is then used to generate the final image. Okay, applying non-trivial semantic edits to real photos. This is just better, different variations of the original one. Yeah, this aligns well with human communication. I think that diffusion models, especially, not diffusion models, but text and language are the ultimate human-computer interface, right? The kind of UIs with buttons, all of that will go away, and eventually you will simply be talking to computers to tell them what you want. Some drawbacks of the previous approaches here, painting over an image, adding an object, transferring a style. They can only operate on images from a specific domain or synthetically generated images. Require auxiliary inputs, such as a mask or images of the same subject. In this paper, we propose semantic image editing that mitigates all the above problems. One second, Buboo here is being quite persistent. Given only an image to be edited and a single text prompt, our method can perform sophisticated non-rigid edits. Okay, they're just kind of saying the same thing again. Take advantage of recent text diffusion models. Right, diffusion models are high image generation models and conditioned on natural language text prompts. That's really the key technology here. Okay, three-step process. So this is their three-step process, A, B, and C. So in step A, we have a real image and a target text prompt. We encode the target text and get the initial text embedding. Okay. So E, TGT. I think TG means target, TGT means target text, ETGT means embedding for the target text. That's right here. So you take this sentence here, you tokenize it. That's kind of what they mean by encoding. You get an embedding, right, which is a vector in some feature space. Optimize it to reconstruct the input image, obtaining eopt. Okay, so then you have an optimized embedding. So the input image, this is not immediately clear here, right? You have this embedding for the target text, and the output of this entire first step A, you get the optimized embedding. And these are both points in the same feature space, right? They're on the same manifold. But how is the image being used to go from the target embedding to the optimal embedding. That's something we need to figure out later in this paper. All right. Then step B, they fine-tune the generative model to improve fidelity on the input image while fixing E optimal. So they take this E optimized, they fix it, and then they take a bunch of gradient steps, fine-tuning this diffusion model here such that the input image is better and better and better matches that embedding. Okay. And then finally they interpolate the optimized embedding and the target embedding. So, right, both of these embeddings are vectors in the same feature space, right, points on the same manifold. They interpolate this, whether it's a linear interpolation, there's probably something more fancy going on. They feed that into this diffusion model that they fine-tuned in step B, and then that produces the actual final output, which is what you want, is the edited image. Mode 3 is best. Okay. All right, back to the text here. Condition, blah, blah, blah. Interpolate between the target, resulting in a representation that combines. Okay. We conduct several experiments, applying our method to numerous images from various domains. Ablation study. Okay, perfect. Suggest significantly better quality, faithfulness. We present the first text-based semantic image editing technique for complex non-rigid edits on a single real image. Semantically meaningful linear interpolation between two text embedding spaces. Demonstrator method on different editing types on images from various domains, showcasing the quality. Okay, so point 1 or contribution 1 and 3 here are basically just saying our results are cool, and then contribution 2 is hinting at something a little bit more interesting here, which is kind of that this embedding space, you can interpolate between it and actually it's semantically meaningful, right? It's not just it doesn't just the input image doesn't just kind of fuzz and become the second image, right? The interpolation between those two embeddings actually have meaning, or not have meaning, but like they actually result in an image that is recognizable and right is partway between a bird closing, a bird without its wings spread, and a bird with its wings spread. Yeah, so there was a bunch of stuff years ago where people basically, they trained these generative adversarial networks to in such a way that the latent spaces could be manipulated, and you could basically change, for example, the age of people that were generated by GANs. You could change the direction that the people were looking, so whether they were looking left or right, that was a single slider in that latent space that you could manipulate. This process of converting a real image to a latent space is referred to as inversion. I would call that encoding. Yeah, encoder-based techniques. And optimization-based techniques. Okay. different random seeds of the same thing. Yeah, so these diffusion models, basically a lot of what they're doing is they're learning this noise function. Like, you add noise when you train it, and then you kind of denoise it with this diffusion process, and then that's what the model's learning. It's learning to remove noise from images. Bunch of previous work here. Textual inversion, dream booth. All right, more example, kind of a deeper dive here into what diffusion models themselves are. Good old diffusion models. I guess they're not old, they're relatively new. Yeah, the core premise of these models is to initialize with a randomly sampled noise image, right? So this is kind of, you start with just a bunch of noise. This is x of t is the image, and this is sampled from a normal distribution centered around 0, right? With I just means the identity matrix, right? So however many dimensions this has, the variance is going to be the identity matrix. Iteratively refined it in a controlled fashion until iterative refine until it is a synthesized photorealistic image x naught. Each intermediate sample, right? So you're going from this complete random noise, and then each step you're taking, and there's a total of capital T steps, right? Lowercase t from 0 to capital T. And the image at that individual time step t is going to be a blended, right? So you have here the original x naught, which is the 0th, which is going to basically be noise. And this square root of alpha t, and then square root of 1 minus alpha t. This kind of allows you to trade off between this sigma term here, or epsilon, diffusion schedule. So alpha t starts very small and then slowly goes to 1. Okay, no, this is the opposite. So alpha t, so at time step capital T, which is at the very end of this diffusion process, the alpha t is 0, which means that it's going to be, this first term in the equation here is going to be 0. So the original noise, there's going to be none of that. Or the original noise image is going to be 0. Plus 1 minus alpha t, right? So if alpha t is 0, this becomes 1 minus 0, square root of 1. This just becomes 1. So at the very last step, this term is going to be, it's all going to be this term. And at the very first step, it's all going to be this term. So what is this epsilon term? This epsilon term is also noise. Each refinement step consists of an application of a neural network, okay, on the current sample x of t. So this neural network, parameterized by parameters theta, takes x of t, the image at that frame, and the time t, followed by a random Gaussian noise perturbation obtaining x t minus 1. Yeah, the train for a denoising objective. So what the network wants to do is basically get the take away the noise from each step, right? So as you you keep adding this noise here, and what the network is trying to predict is trying to say, okay, now that I have this image and this time step t, what is the noise for this, right? And how do I denoise that? So over time, it'll learn image distribution with high fidelity to the target distribution. Right, so it's basically like unblurring a bunch of images. And by progressively unblurring these images, it learns those images very well. Okay, so that's how you can generate images. But how is this text coming into the equation? So this text is put in by conditioning the neural network. So our neural network here, parameterized by theta, takes x sub t, right, the image, and then at a specific time step t and the time step t. But what you do is you also give it an auxiliary input y. So now you condition this neural network on the input y as well. And, right, conditioned on y. So, and the y input can be basically anything at this point. It can be a low resolution version of the desired image, or a class label, but more importantly, it can be a text sequence, or specifically encoded text sequence. So you take the text, you tokenize it, you encode it with whatever LLM, large language model you want to use, hybrid vision language models, text-to-image diffusion models. Yeah, so really with this type of research really shows you kind of how machine learning has built on top of each other, right? Like even just this tiny step here, right? A photo of a bird spreading wings and converting it to a target embedding, right? This is done using a large language model. So going from a photo of a bird spreading its wings to a vector in some embedding space, right, in some feature space, the model that converts between those has been trained on the entire text of the internet, right? It's one of these LLMs trained on kind of next sequence or next token prediction usually. So even just that requires a huge amount of training, huge amounts of data, and took years to kind of perfect. So I think with these diffusion models that rely on these kind of like high quality, rich text embeddings, you see how machine learning keeps accumulating in terms of functionality based on building on what you had before. Okay. Input image X, target text, maximum amount of detail. To achieve this, we utilize the text embedding layer of the diffusion model to perform semantic manipulations. Okay, we begin by finding meaningful representation which when fed through the generative process yields images similar to the input image. This is the step B that we didn't quite understand exactly, or the second part of the second part of step A that we didn't quite understand. Our method consists of 3 stages. We optimize, this is the 3 steps, optimize the text embedding to find the best matches. Optimize is very generic word. Like, we don't know what the hell that means. Okay, well, actually, here you go. Boom. Fine-tune the diffusion model. Okay. So, first you're optimizing the text embedding. Then you're fine-tuning the diffusion model. And then finally, you're interpolating between the optimized embedding and the target text embedding. Okay, so let's actually learn what the hell this optimization means. The target text is first passed through a text encoder, all right, which outputs its corresponding text embedding, target text embedding. And this is basically this little horseshoe with a line through it, this letter E. What this is telling you is that this is telling you the dimensionality of this embedding, right? So the dimensionality of this embedding is the number of tokens, right? So the size of the tokens, and D is the token embedding dimension. So how many tokens do you have? And then each of those tokens, what is the size of that? All right, so tokens, LLMs. Let's see if we can find a cool image. So how many tokens does BERT have? Can we get an idea of what the numbers are here? Okay, so the BERT vocabulary, BERT is a large language model, has around 30K tokens. How about GPT-3? Okay, I think the pricing of GPT-3 is actually based on tokens, so we're not going to be able to find the actual dimensionality of the tokens and the dimensionality, or the number of tokens and the dimensionality of the tokens easily. Okay. So then they freeze the parameters of the generative diffusion model and optimize the target text embedding using the denoising function objective. Okay, so they still keep saying this optimize. So this is frozen, this green one here. They're saying this is frozen, and you're taking this target and you're basically taking steps that want you to make that embedding, target embedding, as close as possible to that input image. And the optimization, they're trying to optimize against this loss function here, which is a function of a image, a embedding, and then the theta, the neural network parameters of the generative diffusion model, right? So the weights and the biases. And the thing they want to I guess minimize here is the expected value at some time step t, and with this noise function here, e of t, or epsilon of t, of the squared, or L2 difference, right? So take the difference and then square it, between that noise here, sampled noise, and the diffusion model f of theta fed with the image at time step t and the embedding, right? So this is kind of what we were seeing up here, where, hey, you can condition the network to also take any arbitrary vector y, and then in this case, the arbitrary vector y that we're giving it is these embeddings. X is the input image, sampled from the uniform distribution of 1 to t, so they randomly sample a time step t. X of t is a noisy version of x, right? So they take the image x and then they add that noise, epsilon. Phi are the pre-trained diffusion model weights. All right, so be curious to know exactly what that's pre-trained on. This results in a text embedding that matches our input image as closely as possible. Relatively few steps. Not a lot of exactness here. right? It seems like they're staying very shy of telling you exactly what's going on. I wish they were more exact about the exact number of steps and exactly what the optimization consisted of. Maybe even some pseudocode to show you that. And then, right, the final part of that is you get this optimized embedding. Okay, actually, this is quite interesting here. Note that the optimized embedding does not necessarily lead to the input image exactly when passed through the generative diffusion process. See the top left image of figure 5. Where's figure 5? Okay, so here they're kind of interpolating, I suppose. We're going to see what that capital N is. But they're interpolating between the different photo of pistachio cakes. Actually, we'll get to that one once we get there. Therefore, in the second stage of our method, we close this gap by optimizing the model parameters phi, or theta, using the same loss function presented in equation 2. Okay, so they're doing this kind of two-step optimization. This is the loss function, is just kind of reconstruction, right? Trying to get rid of this noise that they add to the image. And first they're using that to change the actual target embedding and move it within that manifold to their optimized embedding. And then they're freezing the optimized embedding and then optimizing and then fine-tuning the model parameters of the diffusion model with the same loss function, which in this case shifts the model to fit the input image at the point eopt. We optimize any auxiliary diffusion models present in the underlying generative method. What? So they have other models here, super resolution models? Damn, dude, this is... They're just going to say that in like one line and they're not going to mention it again? Damn, we really need more details here. I wish I could, like they had better diagrams. Seems like there's a bunch of models they don't even talk about. Right, high frequency details. So that's kind of what you want with the super resolution, is in order to get those pretty images, if you don't want it to just look like fuzzy, you use additional models that will make the image crisper. Optimized, recreate the input of the optimized embedding eopt. We use it to apply the desired edit by advancing in the direction of the target text embedding. More formally, our third stage. Okay, what does advancing in the direction of the target text embedding mean? Okay, so it's actually just simple linear interpolation between eTarget and eOptimized. So there's this hyperparameter n, looks like an n, I don't think it's actually n, and you're just interpolating between those, right? So if n is between 0 and 1, if n is 1, then it's all eTarget and this term is 0. If n is 0, then this term is 0 and eopt is all eopt. So the embedding that represents the desired, we apply generative diffusion, fine-tune, conditioned on E. Right, so this is a low-resolution edited image, which is then super resolved using the fine-tuned auxiliary models conditioned on the target text. Our framework in general, our current implementation based on image gen. Text to image, image gen. Okay, so image gen consists of 3 separate text condition diffusion model You have one that the actual generative part of this is working in a 64 by 64 pixel space. Then you have a super resolution model that turns the 64 by 64 into 256 by 256. And then you have a third super resolution model that transforms the 256 by 256 to 1024 by 1024. Yeah, so this is kind of, we immediately recognize this at the beginning here, that 1024 by 1024 is huge, right? And the actual generation of this is not happening at 1024 by 1024. It's happening at 64 by 64, right? And then they're running this through two different super resolution models to get it to the 1024 by 1024. Okay, so Atom Optimizer. So they're basically just taking gradient descent steps. 400 steps, fixed learning rate of 0.001. Okay, fixed learning rate, that's interesting, right? Maybe there could be some cool learning rate scheduling. I don't know if it really applies to this, but could be something. They fine-tuned the diffusion model for 1500 steps, conditioned on the optimized embedding, and they're also fine-tuning these super resolution models. We find that fine-tuning has little to no effect. Eight minutes per image on 2 TPU v4 chips. So this is actually quite intense. All this fine-tuning, especially fine-tuning different resolution models, right? Because you have a bunch of different models here. You have the diffusion model, the lowest one, you have the two super resolution models, and you have the large language model encoder. So that's 4 different models. And if you're running this on a single piece of hardware, right, every time you want to fine-tune any one of these models or load any of these models, you have to load it into the memory of the GPU, or in this case the TPU, and that's going to take a bunch of time, right? Like loading a model onto a TPU or a GPU and then taking it off, loading a different model on there is going to take time. Because of the fine-tuning, using n will generate the original image, and as n increases, the image will start to align with the target text. Okay, so they choose an n somewhere between 0.6 and 0.8. They use some kind of sampling scheme. DDIM versus DDPM. We don't really know what those are. All right, so let's look at the actual figure 5 that we were looking at. So this is different input images here, and then this is interpolating. So when n equals 0 here, this is the E target. So this is the target image, or the embedding at the target image, and then this is the embedding at the optimal image. So they're interpolating in that embedding space, but then they're showing you what the image is corresponding to that, or conditioned on that. And you can see as you kind of interpolate between the optimized version and the embedded, and the original version, it slowly turns. And they say they're using something between 0.6 and 0.8, so like right here is kind of the sweet spot. The interesting thing here to notice is like there's this kind of point here where like it very quickly flips, right? From this image to this image, you have the kind of same cylindrical shape, but then it quickly just becomes a square. The plate changes. It seems like it's kind of completely flipped, right? The background, you no longer have this little plant here in the background. It just immediately becomes a cake. This one is a much more smooth interpolation. In order to test it, we apply our method on a multitude of real images. Unsplash and Pixabay. Unsplash, just free high resolution images. What about Pixabay? 2.7 million free images. Look at this, you could get a little cat. Perfect. Experiment different text prompts for the same image and show the versatility. Since the underlying is probabilistic, right, you can give it different noise, different random seeds, and you see, give it a random seed and tweak the interpolation, and you'll get different results, right? Stochasticity, randomness. Okay, they compare it to a couple different competing versions of this, text to live and SD edit. This is just more fancy results. Let's go up here. This is the comparison. So starting with this image, and then this is the text, a photo of a tree with autumn leaves. You see the difference here. Obviously, theirs is going to kind of look the best. The autumn leaves, right, just this kind of style transfer concept, the SD edit text to live kind of seem to understand. But sitting, crossed arms, right, these more kind of complicated concepts, it seems like the Imagic, this paper, is significantly outperforming these other ones here. These other ones don't really have any idea what's going on, right? This image and this image, it just kind of like applies a weird transfer or a weird kind of style to it, but it's not actually changing the actual semantic meaning, right, of person with the crossed arms. Raising its head, sitting dog, cat yawning, dogs growling. Birthday cake, it adds a little candle. Yellow shirt changes the color of the shirt. Very interesting. Changes the color of the car, but nothing else. Clip score. And 1 minus LPPIPS, indicating fidelity to the original image as a function of n. So text alignment or clip score, so the higher the text is, the higher the score is, the more it's aligned with that. So the final image, photo of a traffic jam, how close is this image to traffic jam? Of course, if you have a really high n, which determines the interpolation, you're basically, it's going to be very aligned to the text. If you have a very low n, right, it's just the original image is not going to be very aligned to the text. Maybe a little bit, just because the road traffic, right, it's like you're kind of, you're picking sentences that kind of match the thing to begin with, right? Race, car. This blue thing here, image fidelity, starts at 1. Fidelity to the original image, right? So if you have an n of 0, you're going to get the original image, and then as you get to an n of 1, it's just going to be whatever the generation would be for this text. So this is kind of their way of saying this is where we found the sweet spot. Okay, they're not messing with the hyperparameters in image gen. Random seeds. for different n values using the pre-trained 64 by 64 and our fine-tuned one. Yeah, so, ooh, I accidentally clicked. So basically one of the things they want to determine here in this diffusion, or in this ablation study, is like how much does the pre-training, or how much does the fine-tuning matter, right? This kind of two-part optimization process that we saw here, described here, where they use this loss function to optimize this target embedding, but then they use that optimized embedding to fine-tune the diffusion model. So in here, they're trying to say, okay, well, is that actual? How much is that giving us? Without fine-tuning, the scheme does not fully reconstruct the original image and fails to retain the image details as n increases. Fine-tuning imposes details from the input image beyond just the optimized embedding, allowing to retain these details. Okay, so model fine-tuning is essential. Yeah, so they kind of there's kind of a U-shaped curve here, right, where not enough gradient steps and you don't get there, too many gradient steps and it's not as good, or little to no added value. So more optimization is actually good, but you are just wasting compute for not as much value. Interpolation intensity, right, so how are they picking this n? Optimal n may vary per input. Right. So this is kind of the graph that we were looking up there. They're basically looking at the crossing point and then kind of picking the spot there. Again, that's kind of the optimal range. Yeah, so I mean, they do say these scores are kind of really arbitrary, so take it with a grain of salt. Okay, so some failure cases here. The desired edit is applied very subtly, or the edit is applied well, but it affects extrinsic image details. Okay, so sometimes it's not applied strongly enough, and they try to increase this n, and then I think it's actually called eta. Let's make sure. Yeah, it's called eta. Sorry, I've been calling it n this whole time. It's the Greek letter eta. But then they make that eta too high, and then you lose the original image. Figure 11 in the appendix. Let's check it out. Figure 10, figure 11. Okay. So, right, they're increasing the eta here, and this is their range. And again, it's very interesting that there's kind of a point. There's a really a threshold, like a boundary, where suddenly the image changes a lot, right? Which kind of makes you think about how latent space partitioning neural networks, right? Where a lot of times if you look at the latent spaces of neural networks, right, it's like the boundaries aren't smooth. It's like you're in one part of the embedding space and then it quickly transitions to a different part. This is like class specific, but there's something happening like that here too, right? Where it's not like the dog slowly rises up into this jumping position. It just like kind of immediately transfers from this sitting to like a smaller picture of a dog that's jumping. And then another jump happens here where it's just now, okay, now it's just going to a picture of a dog jumping. If you were just literally to feed this into a diffusion model, this is what you would get here at the end. Interestingly, there's a flip here where it flips the dog. Also flip it, but it doesn't flip the hill. That's actually quite interesting. So the hill is sloped downwards, and here it flips the dog without flipping the hill, which is quite crazy. Let's go back up. Optimizing the text embedding differently, right? Incorporating cross-attention control. Yeah, I would push back against this. This is not a technique that, or this isn't really preserving the maximum amount of details. The reason the reason you're preserving all these details is partially because you're doing it in 64 by 64 pixels, and then you're using super resolution models that are also fine-tuned for the specific thing to go up. So using two different super resolution models in as part of this process is kind of cheating if you're going to talk about detail. To fit the image, interpolate linearly. Yeah, this is kind of the meat. It's like these kind of non-rigid edits are very crazy that you can do that. All right. Let's see. I think there was one more figure that we didn't find here. Different seeds. So this is ablation study for the embedding optimization steps. Okay, so different amounts of when they take that loss function here, this loss function, and they use Atom to take steps in the embedding space right here, where they're moving from E-target to E-optimized. So very few steps here with 10, 100 steps more, and then so order of 10 magnitude difference in steps, 1,000, 100, and 10. 10, 100, 1,000. Pre-trained, fine-tuned. So pre-trained is going to be the diffusion model is fixed. Fine-tuned is the diffusion model is also optimized. So yeah, if you just have 10 steps, the pre-trained one is not going to give you, is not going to look anything like the input image, right? This is just a generic diffusion model. It's just going to do what it does, right? It's going to be, oh, this is a dog on a grass. Okay, that's what the embedding is. All right, here's a dog on a grass. And then that's at eta equals 0. At eta equals 1, it's going to be a photo of a dog lying down. That's what I have for a photo of a dog lying down. The fine-tuned one is a little bit, this is just all the same original image, so it kind of, regardless of what you give it, it's giving you the same image. Kind of similar thing happens here. Again, this kind of like boundary here is crossed. So you're always kind of struggling to find this Goldilocks zone where these diffusion models, because they're pre-trained, they have some notion of what a photo of a dog lying down is, and they always want to bring you to that, right? And that's what these images, these are like basically unrelated images, and the point of this research is you want to maintain this original look of the image. So like there's this sweet spot here where it looks like the original image, but it has the context of the text. Cool. So that is Imagic, Imagic or Imagic, text-based real image editing with diffusion models. This is starting to become super powerful, and I can't wait to see what this looks like in a couple years. Yeah, thank you for listening. Kind of a short one today, but hopefully this was interesting. Check out the paper, like, comment, subscribe, and see you.